And I invite you now to take a deep breath in with peace and a deep breath out with love. My friends, do you ever recall being told as a child to use your words? Or passing on that wisdom to your own children or grandchildren? Anyone? It's a familiar refrain among parents, especially when tempers flare or your kids just throttled someone or is having a meltdown and instinctive reactions just take hold. Reactive behavior just seems to emerge effortlessly when we feel threatened, doesn't it? Being non-violent isn't easy. So many of us work diligently to instill in our children the importance of kindness in the face of difficulty, teaching them to step away from triggering situations and asking them to use their words to explain their feelings and be reflective rather than reactive. Yet as they venture beyond our watchful care into larger settings like schools, the challenge of maintaining these nonviolent, mindful approaches becomes more formidable. And as adults, these default survival settings can easily resurface, triggered by encounters with family members or annoying neighbors or fellow commuters who cut us off in traffic, don't they? And on top of that, many adults were exposed to trauma and difficulty growing up. Now, few people have the privilege of growing up in homes with continuously peaceful, well-communicating families. Many are raised in environments where family members treat each other poorly, where there's trauma, or they're in dangerous neighborhoods where survival might depend on self-defense. And tragically, some are raised in war-torn, violent environments where they witness the greatest brutality and crimes. Just imagine the imprint of fear, hatred, and violence on the children of Ukraine, Gaza, Israel, and Sudan right now. In a world filled with war, with violence and polarization, it's no surprise that reactive behavior fueled by grief and anger and separation and hatred prevails. Our culture is deeply reactive, quick to defend and attack and blame and shame. In fact, the slightest trigger to our personhood, to our fragile sense of self, to our religion, to our politics or our culture, leads many of us to respond from our reactive survival instinct. And with leaders around the world exhibiting such lack of collective consciousness and social media platforms amplifying dysfunctional behavior, the global climate becomes combustible, degrading quickly into conflict and war. Each week, my friends, we light a chalice for peace and justice. And it's an important intention and a fervent hope for our society, especially at this time of escalating conflict. But what can we actually do in an eye for an eye world to further the ethic of love, the cause of nonviolence? My friends, putting love into action is not a simple shift. Indeed, it may be the most profound, worthy purpose we could commit to in life. It means overriding our baser instincts to become more loving in our thoughts and actions. It means listening with open hearts. It means a commitment that requires daily, if not hourly, or moment-to-moment practice to transform ourselves and our hurting world into one filled with greater kindness and justice. Using the tools of conscious awareness, mindfulness, and centering, we must continually refocus on what we value and commit to acting with love. Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King Jr.'s wife, says, "People who think nonviolence is easy don't realize that it's a spiritual discipline that requires a great deal of strength, growth, and purging of the self, so that one can overcome almost any obstacle for the good of all without being concerned about one's own welfare." She challenges us to be love. And our dear Randall Edwards, stand up, Randall, just show everybody a t-shirt. That's from the King Center, Be Love. And today I invite us to lean into that kind of strength, that kind of power, that kind of wisdom. An attitude which embraces love as an action and a commitment rather than a sentimental feeling. To be love as a guiding value so we can all be vessels for good in this world. In his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. And the foundation of such a method is..." But what does being love truly mean? Can we achieve it? How do we employ those noble values when instinctive reactivity and violence, both physical and mental, are so easy to fall back on? How do we find hope in the midst of devastating conflicts around the world and the hope to transform violence into more peaceful solutions? Personally, I'm inspired by some of the great spiritual teachings and societal teachers on this matter: Martin Luther King Jr., Mahatma Gandhi, and Thich Nhat Hanh. Though each has a unique approach, they share a commitment to nonviolence and love in action. And they're inspired by the ancient principles such as the Sanskrit quality of Ahimsa, emphasizing non-harming in thought, speech, and action. And their philosophies seek not just passive resistance, but an active force for positive change, based on love, aiming to transform both the oppressor and the oppressed. Mahatma Gandhi's Satyagraha, or truth force. King's interpretation of agape, and Thich Nhat Hanh's philosophy of interbeing offer unique approaches, but all converge on the principle that love in action, non-violence, and compassion are essential. Gandhi's Salt March, hunger strike, and civil disobedience, King's nonviolent direct action in the civil rights movement, and Thich Nhat Hanh's integration of mindfulness practices during the Vietnam War exemplify their commitment to nonviolence. And while their specific approaches differ, Gandhi, King, and Thich Nhat Hanh represent a continuum of nonviolent thought and action, offering us a powerful tapestry of strategies and motivations for addressing injustice and for fostering peace. And the legacies of these three giants of compassion give us ongoing inspiration for individuals and movements seeking to create a more just and compassionate world. Can you imagine what a different world this would be if these ideas, their ideals, were taught in schools worldwide and our children were raised on these concepts? Now, at the heart of Martin Luther King's philosophy of nonviolence lay a powerful belief. Love can disarm hate, and peaceful resistance can dismantle injustice. King envisioned nonviolence not as passive surrender, but as a courageous force for change. It involved resistance, active resistance, marches, boycotts, sit-ins, but with the unwavering commitment to refusing to harm even the oppressor. This approach aimed to expose the moral bankruptcy of segregation and discrimination, forcing a reckoning through the sheer power of suffering endured with dignity and love. And by refusing to retaliate, King believed the oppressor would be forced to confront their own actions, potentially sparking empathy and ultimately bringing about change. Nonviolence for King was not a guarantee of immediate victory, but a potent weapon that could wear down systems of oppression and pave the way for a future built on justice, equality, and beloved community, like we try to create here. In his book, Love in Action, Thich Nhat Hanh describes unspeakable horrors as he watches friends, family, and fellow monks being slaughtered around him during the Vietnam War. But he urges us not to give up hope. Recognizing the seeds of violence within us all, he integrates mindfulness practices, compassionate dialogue, and social engagement to address societal ills and dismantle systems of oppression. And Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us that every action for peace requires someone to exhibit the courage to challenge the violence and inspire love. He assures us that love and sacrifice always set up a chain reaction of love and sacrifice. And we must model what we want to see in the world, my friends. And I think that's what we're about as Unitarian Universalists and in this community, being love with one another and in the world. Are you up for this challenge? Can I hear that a little bit more convincingly? Are you up for this challenge of being love? Yes. It's not easy, but we must persist to make a difference in this world. But does nonviolence really work as a strategy for social change? Erica Chenoweth, political scientist and professor of public policy at Harvard, began their work as an expert on war, terrorism, and violent methodologies. But doing research for their book, Why Civil Resistance Works, changed their mind. Comparing over 200 violent revolutions and over 100 non-violent campaigns, Erica found that between 1900 and 2006, non-violent civil resistance was twice as successful as violent campaigns in achieving change, right? That's sign for hope. Now, though violence may achieve a short-term shift in power, they identify a critical threshold, and that is when at least 3.5% of the population actively participates in sustained nonviolent resistance, success is very likely. So can we be part of that 3.5%? Yes. And this participation can take different forms, from joining strikes and boycotts to attending protests and marches. And one of the strengths of nonviolent protests is that they galvanize and influence increasingly larger number of people. Minds can be changed, and people naturally want to be part of nonviolent movements as opposed to violent actions, right? Nonviolence, Chenoweth argues, is surprisingly effective in achieving political and social change. And in 2013, Chenoweth was named one of the top 100 global thinkers by Foreign Policy magazine for proving Gandhi right. Arun Gandhi, grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, also warns us about the increasing violence around the world, saying that unless we change, we're going to destroy our civilization. He remembers sitting on his grandfather's lap when he was just 11 years old and being asked to become aware of instances of physical or passive violence during his day. a heady request for an 11-year-old. But every day before bed, Mahatma Gandhi asked Arun to analyze what he'd experienced, where he had contributed to violence in some way through physical actions, inactions, or even his thoughts. Now, of course, it was easy for him to be aware of his physical violence, but to discern acts of passive violence, he had to ask himself the question, if someone were to do this to me, would I be hurt or helped by it? I invite you to embrace that thinking. If someone were to do this to me, would I be hurt or helped by it? And if it was hurtful, it was an act of passive violence. And passive violence often incites the fight, flight, or freeze reactions in us and may escalate to physical violence. So Arun Gandhi urges us to be cognizant of our actions, of our thoughts, and how we contribute both to physical and passive acts of violence. Mahatma Gandhi's pillars of the philosophy of nonviolence are respect, understanding, acceptance, and appreciation. So I invite us to practice these pillars intentionally. Ultimately, Thich Nhat Hanh believes that the success of a nonviolent struggle can be measured only in terms of the love and nonviolence attained, not whether a political victory was achieved. The essence of a struggle itself is love. It is a core contribution that we can make for the survival of humanity. So, my beloveds, we must evolve our thinking to change our instinctive actions and thoughts and remember that we're all interrelated and interconnected. And every time we build a wall between ourselves and others, whether through criticism or through judgment or by classifying others as different, we create the potential for conflict. And every time we think of ourselves as separate or better than others, we sow the seeds of passive violence. And every time we think we are right and others are wrong, we create division and separation. So what can we do individually and collectively to promote nonviolence? Well, first of all, come to our Love in Action Forum today after the service. We're going to share all the ways you can get involved with Chalice's work of love to make the world more equitable, just, kind for all. Have a pancake next door and then come back in here at noon. Secondly, come to our beloved community listening circle immediately afterwards at 1:15, in which we will provide a safe listening space for you to share how you are impacted by conflict in the Middle East and elsewhere. And it will be an opportunity for us to witness and hear one another so we can remain connected during times of conflict. Thirdly, I encourage you to explore the UUA's 30 Days of Side with Love campaign, which begins today. And you'll find more information in our news and notes and in the chat about that. And tomorrow you might wish to join the annual Martin Luther King Day March and rally in Oxnard to celebrate the work of this great leader and to build connections between communities. And go ahead and ask Willie if you have any questions about that afterwards. And of course, my friends, I urge you every day to take an inventory of your own thoughts and actions. Before you speak, ask yourself, is what I'm about to say or do true, necessary, and kind? True, necessary, and kind. And if it isn't, you might wish to adjust so you don't contribute to passive violence in our world. It is our responsibility as spiritual beings and as a religious community to work on becoming more loving in our thoughts and deeds. We all have seeds of violence and non-violence within us. So which of these will get our attention? Which of these will we nurture? And if you wish to nourish your capacity to be nonviolent, I invite you to follow the example of Gandhi, King, and Thich Nhat Hanh by practicing something like meditation, prayer, or mindfulness to help you become more aware of your thinking and cultivate peace within. And even just singing the meditation on breathing like we did before the sermon, breathing in peace and breathing out love is helpful. There's one of our embodiments of love right there. My friends, let us embody examples set by King, Gandhi, and Thich Nhat Hanh. Be the gardener nurturing seeds of peace with acts of compassion and unwavering kindness. May peace begin within each one of us and bloom across the fertile fields of our world and echo the words of King that said, "Power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice, and justice at its best is power, correcting everything that stands against love." So in our pursuit of nonviolence, let us be like King, who dreamed of a world without hate. And let us be like Gandhi, who refused cruelty. And let us be like Thich Nhat Hanh, who cultivated peace within and love in action. Together, in acts of kindness, in moments of mindfulness, and in bold protests, let us put love into action, allowing their wisdom to resonate throughout our lives. May it be so.